Hello cohort, sorry for the delay in posting this. This is my second video attempt. I recorded the first one in the ER where there was a ridiculous amount of background noise and I realized it was crazy to attempt to get it done. So home now and trying again. In order to pick a resource, I ended up reading several, and I also listened or tried to listen to Tim Wise's video a bunch of times. It took me about 4 times to get through it. I found the delivery really disconcerting. Like some of you have also noticed, it was just a little too bombastic. I don't like being yelled at or talked down to. And the setting made me wonder if it was pontificating from the pulpit. And while I would consider myself a spiritual person, I also recognize that I'm biased against churches. If one examines history, there's an awful lot of hideous things that have been done in the name of the church. And I've also experienced some personal trauma at the hands of the clergy. So, you know, I have to be vigilant, ironically, about my trauma response to this delivery, and it had an impact on my ability to hear. Except, you know, the points that Mr. Wise related about lenses and the blindness we have to our own lenses resonated deeply. In my first mediation courses more than 20 years ago, we were counseled to not be biased, which caused me a tremendous amount of stress. I struggled to imagine how I could ever attain that sort of enlightenment, you know, to be unbiased, when of course we are all biased always. A wise mentor eventually redefined that for me, and she said it was not about being unbiased, it was about acting that way, about striving to behave in a way that mitigated that bias, to be fair. I expect what Wise calls, you know, to properly compensate for that bias to be a lifelong journey, not a state that I'll ever completely master. Because isn't it also true that we as people are always changing, and therefore our lenses must be changing, and so we constantly have to look at that and re-examine our biases and how our lenses are working that day. A salient point by Wise was that in owning our own lenses, recognizing that there always will be a bias, has been shown to mitigate that reality. It comforts me that my constant kind of neurotic self-talk, you know, where I'm asking myself what my bias is, may interrupt what he calls the inappropriate use of the bias. That's a start, at least. I was also moved and charmed by Chapter 21 by Bernie Mayer, who I love, and Chapter 22 by Carrie Menkel Meadow. I was attracted to her chapter merely because of the title. I love that song. Both of these chapters had me think about parallels to my cultural inheritance and how these influence how I show up in a conflict situation and how I perceive certain conflict systems. I too come from a family of activists and community builders. I too have often found myself in the middle. The shadow of the Holocaust and how World War II affected my family is an undeniable thread for me. The phrase never again is kind of embedded in my DNA, and while on the one hand my father's PTSD resulted in a simmering violence that taught me to be very obedient and the peacemaker in the family, on the other hand we were also taught to question authority, never to be sheep, to be critical, to apply logic to every problem so we could make the just choice, not the popular one. I learned that as long as I was polite and advocated for what was righteous, I could make some kind of difference with my father and also in the community. So it's really no wonder, it had me reflect, that I am equal parts peacemaker and shit disturber. If you don't say something, the world can go to hell pretty quickly. Menkel Meadow's chapter was the first time I had learned the word generalized mediation practice, which felt like a gift. Although I will never be as academically and professionally accomplished as she is, I too walk in that middle ground between environmentalists and industry, between mediation and litigation, etc., where I've had to look at both sides now. I too wrestle with the erosion of the mediation practice when it is mandatory in a legal process, such as the court appointed mediations that I have to do. I worry too that the parties should know their rights as well as their responsibilities and how to help them achieve this. I can't give legal advice as a mediator. I want to learn more about how to achieve this balance. I am in awe of Menko Meadows' life work and love how she describes looking for ways to solve the problem rather than win the case. She wrote that she is lucky enough to be a generalist, and also that children of the Holocaust, and Mayer said this too, want to heal the world. I feel this deeply. And as I've matured, I have had to learn that healing the world looks differently for all of us, depending on our lens, and that logic often has zero positive influence on a conflict. But listening and being heard and feeling seen always does. Thank you.